Joe Biden funded the Nazis. He funded Iran. They have an ideological view of the Middle East. It is a view that requires Israel to get weaker and Iran to get stronger. Iran's going to get nuclear weapons. They've told Israel you are not to hit their nuclear weapon sites. And what are we going to do when they have ballistic missiles with nuclear weapons on them that can reach our country and certainly can reach Israel? What happens then? And these fools are worried about feeding the Palestinians in Gaza, but he never mentions that Hamas steals the food, Hamas beats the hell out of citizens, Hamas is the problem, Iran's the problem, Hezbollah's the problem, Harris, Biden, and Blinken are the problem. Prime Minister Netanyahu. And he's talking about the UN, he's talking about Lebanon, because he's coming under attack by our government. And when our government attacks, so does the government in England and in France, in the European Union except for Hungary. And so he's under attack and their government's under attack. And so he puts out these fantastic videos. His English is perfect. As many of you know, he and I went to the same high school because his father was a professor here in Philadelphia for a period of time. He also went to MIT and graduated from MIT. He's a brilliant man. He's a courageous man. He is the Churchill of our time. I see General Kellogg has been mentioning that. He's a good listener, as is Mark Thiessen, two people I like a lot. He's a good listener too, but he is the Churchill of our time. Put yourself in his shoes. Imagine having to deal with this every day, and imagine having to deal with your biggest ally that's constantly leaking information against you, undercutting you, stabbing you in the back, threatening with cutting off weapons, in fact, boycotting you and does cut off weapons, and the party treats you as you're some kind of pariah. Imagine that. But here's what he has to say about the UN in Lebanon. Go.
The charge that Israel deliberately attacked UNIFIL personnel is completely false. It's exactly the opposite. Israel repeatedly asked UNIFIL to get out of harm's way. It repeatedly asked them to temporarily leave the combat zone, which is right next to Israel's border with Lebanon. In fact, on the day that Israel began its ground operation next to our border with Lebanon, we asked them specifically, please leave this area so you're not harmed. Israel is not fighting UNIFIL. It's not fighting the people of Lebanon. It is fighting Iran's proxy Hezbollah, which uses Lebanese territory to attack Israel. Hezbollah attacked Israel last year without any provocation on October 8th, a day after the Hamas massacre. And it's continued to attack us ever since by launching over 10,000 rockets and missiles at Israel. Hezbollah uses UNIFIL facilities and positions as cover while it attacks Israeli cities and communities. These attacks have claimed the lives of many Israelis, including yesterday. Israel has every right to defend itself against Hezbollah and will continue to do so. We regret any harm done to UNIFIL personnel, and the IDF is doing its utmost to prevent such incidents. But the best way to ensure the safety of UNIFIL personnel is for UNIFIL to heed Israel's request and to temporarily get out of harm's way.
It's also interesting you never ever hear Biden or Blinken or Harris or anyone in this administration talk about the Israeli deaths from these missiles or talk about these young IDF soldiers. They're losing a lot of IDF soldiers in Lebanon, a lot of them. It's a small country. When they lose one soldier, it's a significant event. And these soldiers are people who come from the streets. They come out of the cafes. They're waiters, they're plumbers, they're electricians, they're construction workers, they're lawyers, they're doctors, they're every walk of life. Israel's standing army isn't massive. Of course, they have one. But it has to be supported by the citizenry, all of whom are required to go through training, and all of whom, depending on their ages, are required to participate in these war efforts, and men and women. And so there's never any discussion, ever, by the State Department, by the Defense Department, the White House, their talking heads, about the casualties that the Israelis are taking. I mean, what are they supposed to do? Okay, Hezbollah has done the same strategy as Hamas. They're getting behind citizens, they're getting behind the UN, so I guess it's okay. You can keep shooting rockets and so forth and so on. It's just so appalling. Here's the State Department warning Israel over Gaza. Now, these buffoons, they tried to build a pier. They spent $350 million on so they could bring food directly into Gaza through ships. But the pier, built by the Army Corps of Engineers, among others, for some reason it wouldn't stay still. because you have in the Mediterranean what's called currents, which create what's called waves. And so the pier started to break apart. Well, then they got that fixed. And then they realized that pier was not sufficient to carry the weight of all the supplies and so forth that they were trying to bring into Gaza. I mean, what the hell's going on here with the United States? I don't even get it. And so notice also the Egyptians are never pressured to help the Gazans. The Jordans are never pressured. Not a single Arab country is pressured to assist, to take Palestine, nothing. It's all on Israel. Fighting for its survival, still in Gaza, missiles still coming from Gaza, Sinwar, the head monster, they're still tracking him, he's still trying. And meanwhile, over 100 of their people, several of whom are our people, are still being held hostage. But feed them. No, feed the people. And if you don't feed them, we're going to cut you off. Now this bizarre-looking, snide-ass mouthpiece for the State Department, I want to remind you, the State Department has been anti-American for decades, and I'm serious about that, and they've been filled with Jew haters since well into the Roosevelt administration. Well into the Roosevelt administration. But listen to this puke. Go.
Let's start with this warning to the Israelis about...
This is the reporter for AP, who is so good, I can tell from his voice. He's been there forever, and he gives these guys hell. Go ahead.
Improving humanitarian aid deliveries to Gaza. What can you tell us about this?
A few things. So first, the Secretary did write...
So they wrote this letter, and they leaked it to the media. You know, I heard one of the hosts, a colleague of mine on Fox, speaking out loud, why doesn't Netanyahu tell our government what he's going to do before he does it? By the way, like a sovereign nation has to tell another nation, like it's a puppy dog, Master, we're going to hit XYZ on ABC. Is that okay? No, pull back or we're cutting your arms off, your weapons. The reason why Netanyahu doesn't always tell the State Department and the White House what they're going to do is because they leak usually to one of three sources, not exclusively: Axios, Politico, four sources: Washington Post or the New York Times. So they leak in order to try and prevent the Israelis from taking action, because now if they take action, the enemy will know and they'll lose a lot more soldiers. Can you imagine? You're Netanyahu and his government sitting there saying, we can't tell the Americans because they're going to leak it? Go ahead.
To the Defense Minister of Israel, Yoav Gallant, and the Minister for Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, on Sunday to make clear our concerns about the levels of humanitarian assistance that have been making it into Gaza. This was a letter we consider to be a private diplomatic communication that we did not intend to make public from our side.
No, but they leaked it. They got caught, and now they said, well, we don't know who leaked. It must be the Israelis. Why would the Israelis leak a letter that's attacking them? They leaked it, and they leak all the time. Go.
Now that it is public, I am happy to confirm it and speak to it to some extent.
Oh, wow. Now that it's public, I can confirm it and talk about it. Oh, how convenient. Go ahead.
I think you have to put this letter in the context of our ongoing and long-lasting communications and concerns about the levels of humanitarian assistance that have made it.
The only place they don't give a crap about humanitarian assistance is in our own country on the southern border, where sex slavery, according to a piece I read yesterday in the news, that would be Breitbart citing an actual original report from the government, is the worst it's ever been. 4 times worse than it was under Trump. So when it comes to sex slavery in the United States, when it comes to starvation, when it comes to 325, let me ask you this. If there were 325,000 missing Gazan children, Palestinian children, and Israel was responsible, obviously, for protecting their border and so forth, do you think they would ignore it when it comes to Israel? You think they'd ignore it? No. They'd cut off their weapons. They would do all kinds of things. There would be protests. So there's 325,000 missing children in our country as a result of the Biden-Harris policies. The border's wide open. And Biden and Harris have never said a word about it. Not one word. Sex slavery. They've never said a word about it. Not one word. But Gaza they're worried about. Go ahead.
If you go back to April, the secretary wrote at the time to Minister Gallant to make clear that we had seen the levels of humanitarian assistance plateau, and then after they plateaued, start to decline, and made clear that at the time that the levels were unacceptable and that we needed to see Israel implement changes.
Here's the deal. You bastards funded this war. Iran has $200 billion as a result of you. Iran has funded money as Qatar had with Hamas. You've made nice with Hamas. You extended the lease on our base in Qatar. Hezbollah has violated the UN resolution, has crossed the river that separates Israel from Lebanon. You've not done a damn thing about it. You've undermined the Israelis. You've given more money to the terrorists, our enemies and their enemies, than you have given support to the state of Israel. You blew up the Middle East. We had the Abraham Accords. Saudi Arabia was going to join because you funded the enemy. You did something that Neville Chamberlain never did. He appeased the Nazis. Joe Biden funded the Nazis. He funded Iran. They have an ideological view of the Middle East. It is a view that requires Israel to get weaker and Iran to get stronger. Iran's going to get nuclear weapons. They've told Israel you are not to hit their nuclear weapon sites, so that assures that Iran's going to get nuclear weapons. And what are we going to do when they have ballistic missiles with nuclear weapons on them that can reach our country? And certainly can reach Israel. What happens then? And these fools are worried about feeding the Palestinians in Gaza, but he never mentions that Hamas steals the food. Hamas beats the hell out of citizens who get in line for the food. Hamas is the problem. Iran's the problem. Hezbollah's the problem. Harris, Biden, and Blinken are the problem. Vote early, please. Save our country, save Israel.
For all this and much more, sign up for Levin TV.